Welcome to the Scottish Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host Chris, and here we'll be delving into a multitude of strange occurrences that happen within Scotland and beyond. You can contact us with your accounts at the Scottish Paranormal Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Podbean and YouTube, and you can contact us by either means. Tonight's episode we have author Terry Lovelace on the show. Terry's books consist of The Devil's Den and The Devil's Den: The Reckoning, excellent books on his accounts of UFO abduction scenarios through a lifetime of experiences. Terry started his career in the US military in the Air Force between the years 73 and 79, and followed on a career in law where he ended up Assistant Attorney General for 2 states in America. Looking really forward to the show tonight, so buckle in and listen in. So I'd like to welcome Terry Lovelace to the show. And thanks for really coming on. Really appreciate you coming on to the show. As I said, I've listened to your audio book, The Devil's Den, 3 times now. Really good book. I mean, and as I said, The Reckoning as well, Devil's Den: The Reckoning, really good book. And the reason I want to have you on the show is mainly I want people to read your book. I think it's a great book, and I think it encompasses the whole phenomena. I mean, so it goes from early childhood right through into every kind of parts of the phenomena, the abduction phenomena, and even you see where you've got your military connection there, and you even see a part of the investigation, what happens within that, and it gives the listeners a really good insight to what kind of can go on behind the scenes. It was the first time I was kind of privy to seeing a bit of that within the book, and I was quite surprised as well. It was yourself that was narrating it, which was really good as well, because you also get the emotion side of it as well when you're reading it. I mean, which I thought was really good book. So, so the main thing is just kind of where did it start for you? And it's mainly I've got a lot of kind of new listeners, and there's a lot of new listeners to the subject as well, due to quite a lot of things that's happened over the past short while with the disclosure and the static and initial disclosure you might be seeing in America, which came out after the Tic Tac thing and all this kind of stuff. So from that, there's quite a lot of new people to the subject. So I always want to try and get you on the show to highlight this as well, to try and get people to have a look at this and if there. So if you want to just kind of run through where it started for you.
Sure, happy to. I might start off with my experiences began in my childhood. So this is not a new phenomenon to me. This is something that I've lived with, I grew up with. So it's nothing new. The state of disclosure in the United States, people, it's a mixed bag of reactions. I'll go back to December 17th, 2017, I believe, when Leslie Kean, spelled Kean, the New York Times reporter, broke the story about the Nimitz carrier group and the Tic Tacs, and Lou Elizondo and To the Stars Academy got involved. And there were some major revelations made, specifically by active duty Navy personnel. I served 6 years in the United States military, and I can tell you that men and women of that rank aren't allowed to have a press conference the way this Lieutenant Commander Fravor, the pilot of the aircraft that encountered the Tic Tac, the guy from that flew off the aircraft carrier Nimitz. So something, the okay to give that press conference came from a much higher authority.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, every word that came out of his mouth was fully vetted before he said a word. And there have been several other people that have stepped forward too. Kevin Day, who was the radar operator aboard the USS Princeton during the second incident. He's the one that coined the phrase, "It was raining UFOs."
Yeah.
He was operating the radar screen and saw literally hundreds of objects, and assumed that his system had gone down. And he did what we all do whenever that happens. He rebooted. He turned off the ship's radar and then turned it back on, hoping that it would reboot correctly and they were still there. So
the thing with that as well, though, what the thing that people try to understand it as well is why now? Because people try to whistleblow years and years for years. I mean, with different things that's happened throughout the years. And it's one of the biggest questions is, and I know people, the main answer you get back is because maybe it's time for the people to know and stuff like that, right? But what's your kind of theory on that? Why now? Have you any theories on that?
You know, I all I have is conjecture. I mean, I can give you opinion. I don't have any hard facts to base it on, but it's my opinion. And that is that, you know, I question, why would the United States want to allow this level of disclosure from these military officers? And why bring it to the forefront of the nation's attention? And, you know, that article in the New York Times should have been the biggest news story of the century. And it hardly received any notice. And I firmly believe that the average man and woman out here is, you know, they're preoccupied with football and what's on television and, you know, where are they going to go on holiday and 1,000 other things that take priority in their lives. And this is just way down on their list of priorities. Unless you're one of us that have had an encounter or someone who has a deep-seated interest in it. But I think it's going to take something major. It's going to take something pretty dramatic for this to get the attention that it needs.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. As you say, if you ask the average person on the street, I mean, they may be oblivious to the news reports that came through, and it's funny, you know what I mean? It's not funny. I mean, it's actually like it's crazy that it's no the point. It's not had the limelight, because it has. It's been in quite a lot of the news being broadcasted enough. It's just people. I wouldn't say they're not interested. It's probably what you're saying. They're interested more what's happening on Facebook or TikTok or Love Island or something like that. And this is it's astronomical what's happening. And I know for people in the community, if they're in this type of community and who they can follow it and they'll research it and investigate it, it's a big thing for them because they hang on the word to it or they're looking at the inner workings of it. But for people people outside the fringes of that, it's just no in their mindset to look at it, which I find just crazy.
It's hard to comprehend. Like I said, it should be the biggest news story of the year. But you know, I look back in history and was it 1961, 62, 63, I think, that Betty and Barney Hill in New Hampshire in the United States had their famous abduction. And it really put the concept of alien abduction on the map. There was a magazine called Look that was a picture magazine of the day. And there was a huge article about Betty and Barney Hill being abducted and their entire story. And it never went anywhere. Very few people were interested. I don't know. I don't get that. I wonder sometimes if we're conditioned or something. I don't know.
I don't know, but that's my always kind of thought in the back is the whole kind of question, why now? It worries me. Why now? Because is there something imminent why we should know this, or is it just time? And that's the kind of thing, the under kind of line, why? No lie in a sense, line, but it's like, why now? That's what kind of tends to, I wouldn't say keep me awake at night, but it's one of the kind of threads that you think, why now? Is there something reason there? And one of the things that stuck in my mind as well was one of the interviews with Luis Elizondo, and somebody had asked him the question, if people knew what you know, what would the next week look like? And with that question, and the answer from that was it would be if I can remember correctly, it was like a deep kind of intake of breath for a day or something, and then a sigh for the rest of the week, and it would be like a somber sigh. And from that, you think, what the bloody hell does he know?
Yeah. Yeah. And an interesting phenomenon, I apologize, my chair squeaks. I need to get some oil on that. An interesting phenomena is that sometimes I see things other people can't see. For instance, in 2014, my wife and I were coming out of her optometrist appointment, and she hadn't had her eyes dilated. Her vision was fine. And as we walked to the parking lot in the back of the building, I saw this woman by her car door looking up. So human nature, I did the same. I looked up and I saw a silver cigar-shaped object in the sky about as, about an inch long at arm's length. If you put it up in the sky, so fairly big. It wasn't just a dot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a sunny day, and the sun glinted off the top, and the bottom was shaded, and it was clearly something that didn't belong there. I mean, it wasn't a jet, it wasn't a dirigible, it wasn't a balloon. It was something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I pointed it out to my wife, and I said, "Oh my God, look at that!" And she says, "Look at what?" And I said, "Right there." And she says, "I don't see anything." And I said, "You can't see that?" And she says, "No, I can't see a thing." She said, "I see the sky." And I asked this woman, I said, "Madam, are you seeing what I'm seeing in the sky right now?" And she turned in my direction and just went. So clearly, the two of us could see this. And for whatever reason, my wife could not.
Mm-hmm.
And for all the experiences that I've had over the years, my wife has really only had one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in 1987 when she woke up in the middle of the night and I wasn't in bed. And she saw a silhouetted figure of a petite, short woman between the foot of our bed, silhouetted against the window.
Mm-hmm.
And this entity, whatever it was, spoke to her telepathically. She heard it clearly in her head. "Everything's okay, go back to sleep." And that's what she did. She went back to sleep. And that's been her one and only encounter for a lifetime.
I think it's mad that, and I mean as well, even having that encounter, but it's mad what you're saying. No, mad in a sense, like crazy, but it's how some people can see these things and some people can't. It's you get, for example, children are more susceptible to seeing things, and it's some of them. I think over the years they lose that ability, and some still keep it. And you get that, and then some people just close themselves off to it. I mean, my wife, for example, she believes in things, but she doesn't want to know. She doesn't want to know what's there.
Yes.
And it's probably more out of fear than it is out of it's not an interest in, but it's because it's no lack of interest. It's possibly like a fear, no actually want to know what's there or what could be there.
I agree with that. It is fear. I think you're spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's there's people who will be in the same categories that where they'll either not want to know because they're just not interested, and there are people who know what to know because they're a level of fear there. Because it's like now, for example, with the UFO phenomenon now, and although people in the field have a good belief for it, right? They don't need to. They don't need to believe in it or whatever. It's like it's quite a lot of just know it is there. It's there's so much witness testimony, there's so much evidence, and it's crazy enough to think that it's not there. But then when you're with the revelations that came out as well, it's like this actually exists, and it's just another. Although you know that anyway, it's just another wee kind of thing there that kind of pops up to show you that, and it's and what can stem for that as well, for the things inner working behind it. It's just the possibilities are endless.
They are, and I agree with that. I mean, until something spikes your interest in it, it's just something else and 1,000 things to think about in the course of the day. I wish we had more answers than we have questions, but we don't. We're left with a lot of questions. But yeah, I agree with you, and I think that, well, I'll just say that it's going to take a major event. I'll just restate myself. It's going to take a major event to grab people's full and complete interest. But I think that's coming.
I do too. But it's the worry of that is it's not going to be a nice thing of that. That's the worry of it. I mean, and people are going to just need to know for what it is. So, but going back to your own accounts, so when it kind of, if you want to kind of briefly run through, I don't want to obviously ruin the whole book for the listeners. Not, I mean, if you give them a kind of brief outline of where it kind of started for you at the start of your kind of experiences, and then for where it kind of went from there.
Yeah, I could give a brief rundown of my childhood experiences. Just a brief run through. And I exposed in my second book that I think these things go back to age 4. At least that's as far back as I can trace them. But as a child, I had, I know this sounds crazy, but this is what I saw. I saw what looked like little monkeys, like little circus monkeys in my room. There were always 4 of them. And, that sounds ludicrous, but I think that these things appear to children in a way that the child will see as most benign. They come across as non-frightening, non-threatening, and don't want to show themselves as they truly are. And I've got emails from people. I've got over 2,000 emails from people who want to share experiences with me. And I've had people write to me and say that between the ages of 4 and 7, they saw orbs and owls and deer and raccoons and orbs of light. One woman saw Disney characters, cartoon characters in her room. So I think somehow they have the ability to know what the child will find most palatable and approach them like that. But I think the people that are targeted in that range become what the phrase targeted individual means. That is, they're targeted for life. That those experiences will continue. One of the commonalities that I found, which I thought was interesting because I don't know anybody else that's made the observation, the people that had the most vivid experiences in their early childhood, age 4 to 8, tell me that they had a dream somewhere between the ages of 4 and 8. They had a dream, and that dream is as vivid today as it was when they had it, 25, 50 years ago, whenever it was. And that seems to be a thread of commonality that runs through a lot of people that had experiences with these things as a child. I saw my first UFO when I was at the age of 8. 1963, I was in my backyard and I was shooting arrows into a bale of hay. And this was urban area, South St. Louis City, in a row house. We had neighbors all next to us. And while there really was nobody on either side of me out in the yard, there were other people out cutting grass, hanging laundry, doing all kinds of things. Early afternoon, beautiful sunny day. And as I'm looking down, I'm fixing an arrow into the bow. And as I'm looking down, I saw this elliptical or like circular shadow move across my feet. And I looked straight up, and 50 feet over my head was this saucer. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. I thought it had this cool vibe to it. Like a new sports car on a showroom floor has that vibe, that feel to it. That's what this was like, seeing this thing. I had no fear whatsoever. But it was a unique experience because as soon as I laid eyes on it, there was this distinct auditory change that happened. because the neighborhood was loud. I mean, there were kids, dogs, cats, traffic. And suddenly it sounded like I had both hands pressed against my ears. And the sounds were there, but they were very muffled.
Mm-hmm.
And I smelled the grass had just been cut. And this is a very vivid memory, an olfactory memory, because I smelled freshly mowed grass mixed with this smell like of ionized air,
Mm-hmm.
like outside after a thunderstorm. And I'm looking up at this thing, and my mind is racing as an 8-year-old. What is this? Is it a plane? And I'm looking to see CCCP or USA or something, some kind of nomenclature on the side to identify it. And of course, it was nothing.
Yeah.
And I watched it for a few moments. What's curious was I had the idea, and I don't know where this came from, that I should lie on my back and look up at it to get a better view. And that really doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's what I did. Unfortunately, at the age of 8, I didn't wear a watch. So I have no way of accounting for how much time actually lapsed from the moment that I laid eyes on it to the moment that it left.
That was my next question. I was going to ask you that.
It seemed like 5 to 10 minutes. That's a pretty broad area, but passage of time is difficult for an 8-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one UFO investigator named Lorian Fenton told me that she believes that I was taken up into this thing and then put back down, and that's the reason I was on my back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I believe that, but who knows? She could be right.
Mm-hmm.
While I'm watching this thing, it kind of wobbled a little bit in a breeze. It wasn't absolutely stationary.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of tilted, and it shot off like from 0 to bullet speed in the blink of an eye, and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately, all the sounds of the neighborhood come back fully, and I could hear everything going on, and things were back to normal. But I was excited. I mean, I was just thrilled to death. I felt like I had just seen something. And I think I did see something very important. And I jump up and I yell, "Mom!" I yell for my mother. She comes running out, and I'm like, "Did you see it? Did you see it? It was so cool." And it was interesting because my parents, I told them what I saw. I was a pretty straight kid. I didn't lie. I didn't make up stories.
Mm-hmm.
I told them I saw, using the words of the day, a flying saucer. And, they sat me down and said, "We don't know what you saw, but we know you did not see a flying saucer." And I couldn't understand why they wouldn't accept my story. My mother gave me a pencil and a piece of paper and said, "Draw what you saw." I drew a circle and I handed it back to her because that's what I saw, But 1963 was kind of a different time. My dad says, "You can't tell people you saw a flying saucer. They'll think there's something wrong with you."
Mm-hmm.
And then he added, "They'll think there's something wrong with us." I'm like, now I get it. Now I get it. So, yeah, but that made a great big impression on me.
Definitely would. Yeah.
And, like you said, the implications are huge. I'm an 8-year-old and I'm thinking, well, if this thing didn't come from Earth, it came from, thinking like an 8-year-old, Mars or Venus. That's the only two points of reference I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that means that there must be people there. And there must be people there that live in houses and have jobs and go to work like my dad does and work in factories and put these things together. And, they must have some type of training program to train the crew to try, and it was just a big epiphany for an 8-year-old to try to process all that. Because if you see a UFO and you think what's behind it, there's got to be a whole lot behind it. I mean, it was either made here on Earth.
Even
all of them were.
Even in some simpler terms as well. When listening to that, and you hear the stories, and there's always like an Oz factor where the sound's blanked out or it's muffled. It's almost like you're in a vacuum. So even looking at that and looking at what mechanisms are happening there to what's happening there to actually make that. I mean, so it happens in so many different cases. So even thinking about the possibilities there, what's going on there technically to actually cause that bubble around you. You know what I mean? It's like it's just mad.
You know, one of the questions I get asked all the time is, if these things are real, if they really exist, why don't they come down and talk to us? Why don't they come down and talk to the United Nations? I don't know. Maybe they have. You know, I think about there's a disparity in our intellect. I mean, I think that they are way above us. And I mean, I have a dog, and you know, dog loves me. Pet him. You know, dogs have been domesticated now for 200,000 years. They've been living with us. He understands simple commands. I understand some of his wants and needs by body language and and the like. But you know, I can't just walk in and say, "Hey, how was your day?" You know, and I think that there's that disparity of intellect between the two of us that make it more difficult for them to maybe come down to our level and have a conversation. Just a guess, just conjecture, but
No, totally. So your parents never believed you when you seen that, and obviously you had the visitations along with that as well.
I did. I had the nightly visitations that would they go back to, like I say, to age 4, as I described in both books, but more clearly in The Reckoning. That I would be taken in the middle of the night. And I was terrified of going, but the destination was always the same. It was this round room with a gray padded floor. And I was always in my night clothes. And there were the same group of kids there, and they were in night clothes too. They were all in that age range of 4 to 7. We played. We knew each other. Now I didn't know these kids from daycare or from school or from the neighborhood. They were strangers, other than we met inside this thing wherever it was they took us. As a child, I thought they took us to a building somewhere, but you know, in retrospect, as an adult, I think they took us to a ship. I think that's where we were at. And there was a woman there that I called her Sue, and she was clearly a hybrid entity. And she was the same entity that I would later meet, you know, 50 years later, and call her Betty. And she hadn't aged a day. And that's, but we would do things like put together these puzzles out of odd geometric shapes. I mean, there were toys there, but I mean, not trucks or army men or anything like that. It was these geographic forms in different colors that she would ask us to put together. And one of the exercises that we did was she would, we all had a geometric form about so big, you know, maybe 4 inches in diameter. I had a cube that was blue. You know, and other kids maybe had a sphere that was red, or a pyramid that was yellow, all different colors. And this thing was strange because I could hold it in my hand, but it had no mass. It didn't weigh anything. I mean, if I dropped it, it would fall to the floor, but it just felt like it had no mass. And we'd put it in front of us. We sit cross-legged on the floor in front of it. And Sue would ask us to move it with our minds. Now, I know that sounds way out there, but this is a clear memory that I had. And I had people, one of which being an author named Deb Cauble, who is very well respected. She was trying to think of his name. That doesn't matter, but she remembered having the same type of object. And I remember trying to move it with my mind, and nothing happened. And then one day it like rolled across the room about 3 or 4 feet. And Sue came over and was just giving me high praise and, you know, telling me what a good job I did. And my question is why? Why would we go through this exercise? And I had lots of experiences from then. Also, we spoke amongst us kids, and between Sue and us, everyone there spoke telepathically. And it seemed to be the most natural thing in the world. I don't get that, but I'll say this: there's a good reason why human beings can't communicate telepathically, and that is, I don't think we're disciplined enough. I think it would be, terrible. I think it'd be blood in the streets. I mean, it would be, if our minds were an open book and every thought that we had was could be perceived by the people around us, that wouldn't work so well.
Too much mind clutter.
Yeah,
totally. So when did you ever get any answers back when you were asking Sue why you were doing exercises and things like that? Did you ever get any answer back for it, or did you ever have a theory on why it was? Was it just conditioning, or is that what you took it as?
I think that they were conditioning us for some purpose. I don't think it was just for entertainment purposes. I don't think it was for purposes of study. I think that they were, we were being auditioned for something. But then again, that could just be part of being what's called a targeted individual who's going to be observed for life. Maybe they need to establish a baseline of what our abilities are at that young age so they can measure our progression throughout the rest of our life. I mean, either one's as likely.
It must have been terrifying as well at some points, as when you were younger, you know what I mean, and encountering some of these things at night as well.
Yeah, the going up to this ship or wherever they took us was never frightening. That was just familiar. And what was frightening was these little monkeys, these things that were masquerading as monkeys that would appear in my room. And I thought it was peculiar in that they would always ask my permission. They'd say, "Won't you come with us? Come with us and play?" And it seemed like I had the ability to say yes or say no, because I know many times I went with them, and I know sometimes I would get scared and scream. And as soon as I'd scream, the hall light would go on, my parents would come down, and these things would just disappear in a swirl of shadows. So I've always been curious. That's a question I've never had answered, was why would they need to ask my permission when I was young? Because then obviously as an adult, they didn't ask my permission in 1977. They just took us.
So moving forward, when you had a lot of obviously experiences when you're younger, and it was probably a harrowing time for you at some point, and obviously when the ships and that, you said it was familiar and stuff, but then when did that kind of episode end for you? And what age you started to have that? I mean, I know what you said for a young age, or maybe between like 48 and stuff, and then after that, did it soon dissipate?
Yeah, my last childhood experience was in 1966. I was 11 years old, and it was a bitter cold January evening, and there was nothing unusual about the evening. I didn't watch anything scary on television. There was nothing out of the normal. It was a normal evening. And I went to bed, and I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. I don't know what time it was. And there were these lights flashing through the window of my bedroom. My bedroom was on the second floor. And these lights are just incredibly bright, and they're flashing. And they're green and yellow and white. And I thought, maybe a fire truck or something, maybe the house across the street's on fire. I don't know. And I got out of bed, and I went over to the window, And we lived in a very old house. It was very drafty, and the windows had Venetian blinds and then thick drapery over it to keep out the draft. And I pulled back these heavy drapes and I tucked them into the Venetian blinds so I could kind of have a hands-free look at what was going on out there. And that's when I saw that right level with my second story window was a saucer, maybe 20 feet in diameter. It had a dome on top. And that dome is where the flashing lights were coming from. And the lights were so bright that if I looked at them, it hurt my eyes. And I watched them for a minute or two. I never felt fearful. I never felt actually even overexcited. My emotions were somewhat muted. They were inappropriate to what I was seeing. And I knew this. I knew I didn't want to scream for my parents. And I watched them for a moment or two, and then I became completely disinterested, and I went back to bed. And I woke up the next morning, and at first I didn't remember it. And I threw my legs over the edge of the bed, and then I saw the window with that curtain tucked into that Venetian blind, and it all flooded right back to me. I knew exactly where I was. And I don't think it was a dream. There's no way it was a dream. Like I say, I got out of the bed. I did this thing to the blinds quite intentionally and unintentionally. I left it that way, but I wonder, had I not done that, would I have a memory of it still? Or would that memory have not come back? I don't know. But then I was age 11. Then I had 22 years of relative peace. In 1974, January 74, I saw a UFO when I was in the Air Force, but it was from a distance. It wasn't what I call a close encounter. And then in 1976 was the year. And then in 1977 was the year that my friend and I went on a camping trip down to Devil's Den at northwest corner of Arkansas, about a 6.5 hour drive from the base that we were stationed on. We were both active duty at the time. We were NCOs living on the house in base housing, family housing, because we were both recently married. And so I had those 11 years of peace and quiet. And then I had this event. But this event in 77 was the biggest event of my life. I think of it on the magnitude of the birth of our children or something of that order, because it was such a big event for me that I tend to view my life as pre-1977 and post-1977. I feel like we went down there as a couple of kids, late teenagers, and we left there fully adults.
On that, in the book, you seem to have been kind of pulled there. The two of you are pulled to that area. Do you suspect that Toby as well had maybe experiences prior to Devil's Den?
I sure do. And what a shame it is that we never had the opportunity to discuss that. My friend Toby wanted to be an astronomer, cosmologist. He was a very gifted mathematician. He was in the service like me. He was in the service to get a ticket for a college education. That was the reason we were there. He wanted to finish his enlistment and go study physics and then go on and get a postgraduate degree in cosmology or astronomy or something. And he was a gifted kid. He was brilliant. And I often wondered, where did that interest come from? I would bet my life he was taken like I was. Who knows? We could have even met each other on that ship back in the day. We don't know.
Why did you have any theories on why it happened at Devil's Den? Because like these things could potentially take you from anywhere.
They could. They could have taken us out of the house, out of the car. They could have taken us anywhere. And how did we get to Devil's Den? This was Toby's idea, but I fully endorsed it. And it was odd because we were going down there to go camping in the wilderness, and we were living in the middle of a wilderness. I mean, there were a half a dozen state and federal parks within an hour drive or less. Matter of fact, there was one directly across from the base. That base is still there today. It's Whiteman Air Force Base. At the time that we were there, it had B-52s with nuclear weapons, and it had a squadron of Minutemen II ICBM missiles scattered out across the countryside in farm fields and the like. And all that stuff's long gone. It's now home to the B-2 bombers. That's where they call home. But I think that this idea to visit Devil's Den State Park was planted in Toby for some reason. And, I started writing this book, Incident at Devil's Den, in 2016. And when I did, somebody said, you ought to look up and try to find the spot where they took you on Google Earth. And I told them, I said, it's got to be covered with 40-year-old mature trees by now. We're not going to find anything. I think I may have sent you a picture of the plateau.
Yeah.
And if you look at it from Google Earth, it's almost triangular. I stated in the book that when we walked it seemed horseshoe shaped. But what's interesting was that the grass is cut on top of that plateau. Now there's still just a dirt road that goes almost vertically up the side of that hill. But there are tractor marks, and someone goes up there on a regular basis and keeps that clear cut. They cut the weeds and the grass down to they're about 6 inches high, and it's done on a regular basis. Now, the interesting thing is that's not actually in Devil's Den State Park. I had no way of knowing this at the time. If you go on Google Earth, it'll show you that there's a boundary line, and this triangle where we set up our camp on top of this plateau is actually on federally owned land that's leased to an individual, and it's owned by the Bureau of Land Management. And it's still an off-limits area.
Have you ever actually been up personally since the incident?
Have I been up there again?
Yes.
No, I have not.
No.
I have not. I have an aversion to camping or that type of thing. I've not been back. And it is off limits still. There's a chain across the road, and there's no admittance sign still. Next year will be the 45th anniversary of the event. And I'm seriously considering making a trek down there and maybe take some friends with me, trespass at night up on top of that ridge, which I know is still there, and spend the evening. I don't know if I'm ready to do that or not, but I think that might be good for me to do.
The craft you've seen on the night, it's that type of craft's been seen. It's been seen elsewhere. Have you found any reports yourself yet?
Oh yeah. I found. As a matter of fact, there's a TCB-3 or something that's an alleged United States Air Force or Space Force craft. That's a triangle, but it's a single depth. It's a 1-story tall vehicle, and it wasn't around in 1977. There's a gentleman by the name of David Marler, and David Marler literally wrote the book on triangular-shaped UFOs, history from biblical times to today. And in that year, in 1977, my incident happened in June. he had a relative, I want to say a sister, who was traveling on the I-70 corridor that goes from St. Louis to Kansas City. And the people in the car saw a triangular shaped craft that was big. And that same year, in 1977, there was a woman in the Hudson Valley area up in the Northeast in New England who claims that she saw a triangular shaped craft, and she used the exact words I used, 5 stories deep. So
we had a report here. I've only relayed this once because the person I spoke to, they've not been confident enough to come on and record their story yet, but I've heard their story and I've not relayed it and I've kept them anonymous and stuff like that. But they'd seen a triangle. It was 2015, and it was the description, if I'm served me right, my memory correctly, it was either the size of 2 aircraft hangars or an aircraft carrier. That was the kind of the size of it. They said that they couldn't believe that nobody else had seen it. It was like they seen it and it even pulled. They said they could see it going into the cloud, and it pulled some of the cloud in with it.
Yeah.
When it went in, and it was like you're talking. It was like 5 miles from here.
Really?
2015.
2015. And I bet they said it was dead quiet, not a noise.
Nothing at all.
Yep.
Nothing at all. But this person had a kind of history experiences. It was a total chance encounter. Total plausible people, but they said they were going to contact me to come back on, but you don't push these things. I mean, so it's a case of they've given me the story, but I've never really relayed it for the fact that they've no came on and or wanted it recorded yet. But I met them again and they said they were going to come on, and there was a bit of a backstory to it as well. I mean, with the stuff they'd seen when he was younger and stuff, but that was one of the other stories that he'd seen that, and it was like literally quite local. It was pretty amazing. So sorry, so that was like just going on with it, but it did come to mind when obviously listening to the book about the size of the triangle and being that kind of craft, you know what I mean? So
and that happened in 2015, you said?
2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Wow. People see stuff all the time. In 1997, I don't know if it made much press over there or not, but there was a phenomenon that became known as the Phoenix Lights. And there is a woman, Lynn Keitel. She's a medical doctor, and she's kind of done all the research and written the book. That giant triangular shaped craft that flew over Phoenix was seen by thousands of people. And then after the fact, not many people wanted to talk about it. And it seems to be a common thing too.
Totally.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
And the military airbrush a few, what do you call it? Flares over the top of it. Airbrush a few flares at the same time, or run about the event to try and kind of brush over it. And
what's interesting is the governor of the state, and I forget his name. The governor of the state went on television and made jest of it. Said, well, we've discovered the cause of the Phoenix Lights, and I'm happy to say he's here today. And he had one of his aides come out dressed in an ET costume.
Yeah.
And of course, everyone laughed and applauded. And then when he was out of office, he went on all the news networks and said, I feel really bad about that because, this really happened. And I didn't know it, but he's actually a licensed pilot. So he saw it too. Not while flying, he was on the ground, but I mean, he has a lot more experience with flying things than most of us do.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
No, it totally is. So at the incident at Devil's Den when it happened, and Was there no feeling beforehand about you thinking it was something that was going to happen? Or
Yes. That's a really interesting thing, because I've had other people write to me who've had similar experiences to mine, and a lot of them report the same thing. Here's what really happened is we were, and neither one of us had ever been camping before, so this was a new experience for us. And we did all the fun stuff you do when you're going on a camping trip, and we'd had really a pretty good day. And we're on these air mattresses with the fire in between us. And I recall my friend saw something. He's like, "Hey, were those lights there before?" And he had his head turned to the west away from me. And I couldn't see what he was talking about. And I stood up and I saw these three triangle of little stars sitting just above the horizon. And they were too far above the horizon to have been lights like from a highway or a parking lot or something. And I said, "No, those weren't there before. I don't know what those are." And we're watching them for some period of time. I want to say about a half an hour or so. Again, I didn't time it on my watch, but we're talking about it. And they moved. And what they did at first was they rotated like they were on an axis. And they turned about 120 degrees. And that's when I felt this sense of calm wash over me, this mildly sedated feeling. And when two people see something incredible, human nature is, you want to debrief with the other person and have them validate your experience for you. Did you see what I saw? And there was none of that. There was just silence between us. But I remember that I knew that we were witnessing something unusual. And then they started to climb upward into the sky. And I could feel this feeling of sedation wash over me almost in waves. And very little to no conversation between the two of us. So our response to that was just, not normal, not typical.
That's going through that though, and for what you seen that night, and for what you experienced, was there the common thread that goes through quite a lot of scenarios where, as you said, you don't talk about it. You don't talk about it after. You tend to do something obscure like go to sleep. I mean, as you did as well, and that's a common theme with quite a lot of these things where it's just doesn't get talked about, and it's not because it's sometimes it might feel like it's bad talking about it or whatever else, but it's just a kind of thing that people brush it off, or they tend to. I've heard stories where with friends where one would see something, another one would just totally deny it happened.
I think that speaks to the level of their influence over us. I genuinely believe that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's just contrary to human nature. We should have each been bolstering our experience and saying, "Yeah, this is what we saw." Put our heads together and compare notes, but we didn't. We didn't want to talk about it. And what else was really odd was that this guy Toby was my best friend. We worked together on a night shift. We both had plans to go to college. We both had career plans mapped out. And we were both newly married. Our wives were the best of friends. And, on our days off, we might play cards or tennis or do something, barbecue over at Toby's house. We would spend time together. So really strange. We left the meadow, and we left all our stuff there. We were just happy to leave. And we left the tent, everything there. And I took my wallet and my car keys. That was it. And Toby was able to navigate me in the dark, which was an amazing feat. and get us back to the main road. But on the way back, I sensed something was different. Something was different between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
And here this guy is, and he said, we're both in a lot of pain, but I think whatever they did to me, they hurt him worse, because he was kind of curled up into a ball on this big bench seat in my 1966 Impala. And I suddenly wanted nothing to do with the guy. And I really had trouble with that. I couldn't reconcile that feeling. And I have trouble with it today. But it changed the character of our friendship. And there are hundreds of examples of that. I got, hundreds of letters from people telling me that their group of friends witnessed something, and then I call it the band breaks up. Everybody goes in a different direction. Yeah. And there's an excellent book by Raymond Fowler called The Allagash Four, about 1974, I think was the year. 4 guys, 2 of them were twins, Jack and James Weiner, another guy named Rack, R-A-K, and I don't remember the 4th gentleman's name. The 4 of them were all best of friends. Yeah. And they went out and they did this camping trip. And they camped on this lake off the Allagash River. And they were really in a remote area, I mean, miles from anywhere. And they wanted to fish at night. So what they did was they had, what do you call it, a chainsaw. And they cut some wood, and they built this huge tower of wood for firewood. And they lit this firewood, and it just made this gigantic fire that would burn for hours. And they did that because these guys knew what they were doing, that if they went out onto this lake in the middle of the night with no moon or little moon, they wouldn't be able to find their way back to the camp. So this was kind of like their lighthouse to get to navigate them back. And while they were fishing, one of the guys, I don't remember who, saw something and said, "Is that the moon?" And he remembers everyone looking, and it was obvious it wasn't the moon. And it suddenly got bigger and brighter, and it was an aluminum canoe, and it lit up the inside of that aluminum canoe like crazy. And that's when these guys were terrified, and they're just paddling like crazy to get to shore. And then that's it. They don't remember anything. The next thing they remember is they're paddling back to shore at a leisurely pace, and their fire that had been gigantic bonfire some hours earlier is now just barely visible as a pile of, glowing embers. And that group of friends all split up. They all went different ways after this event. Matter of fact, even on the car on the way back, there was no conversation about it. Even the twins, and you know how close twins normally are. Yeah. They didn't communicate very well, didn't communicate very much at all. The only reason that this whole event came to light was the one twin was having nightmares about being abducted while on the lake. And he calls his brother up and says, "Hey, I've been kind of bothered by this nightmare. Let me run something by you." And the other twin says, "No, let me tell you. Do you dream about this?" And he described they were both having the exact same dream. And that's when they decided to see a psychiatrist or psychologist, I can't remember which, undergo hypnotic regression and recover those memories. So amazing story. Very good book. Too.
It must be something they do to you, because you think anything, if people are surviving a traumatic experience together, it would usually probably bring them together closer.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
It must be something that's done to make you part, because it happens in so many different cases across the world, everywhere.
There are 2 exceptions to that rule that I can think of, and that was Betty and Barney Hill remained very close for the rest of their marriage. I know Kathleen Marden, who is Betty Hill's niece, and she confirmed that. And The other one was a gentleman from South Africa who contacted me, and he was an auto mechanic in a town somewhere from, I don't know the name of the village, I won't say it, but he had a call from a customer saying that the belt on his tractor had broken down and he needed a new belt.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, I knew exactly what he needed. I had worked on his machine before. He said, I threw it in his car, his Range Rover, and drove out to the farmer's field and saw him at the far end of the field, drove out to the far end of the field. And the guy was just freaking out. He was just going crazy. And all I could say was, over there next door, I saw them. And they both together walked through this thick brush that separated his property from his neighbor's property.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he saw 4 of these bullet-shaped silver objects, the size of a full-size van.
Mm-hmm. And
And they were in the middle of this field in kind of like a diamond-shaped formation, and they were all rotating real quick, real fast. And the guy said that he thought it was a motion picture set. He was looking for cameras and couldn't find anything. And he made the decision. He said, well, I'm going to walk over and greet them. And his friend said, no, don't do that. You're going to put yourself in jeopardy. And his friend had a pistol out. He's like, put the pistol away. There's no need for that. You'll shoot me. So anyway, he walks across the field, the short distance, and walks up to one of these things that's spinning. And as he says, as it's spinning, it slows and stops. And then a doorway opens up like a camera lens, like the pupil of an eye would.
Iris.
Yeah, this doorway opens up, and there's what looked like, these are his words. It looked like a man of the Mongolian race, dressed in a tinfoil suit with tinfoil boots. And he said he spoke to me by thought transference. I'd never heard the term thought transference before.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple things. He spoke, we communicated by email, and his writing was half English, half Afrikaans.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little bit of difficulty communicating, but we got everything right. It's important. And the man in the spacecraft spoke to him by thought transference, and he said to him, we apologize for the trespass. We're affecting some repairs, and we should be done very shortly and be on our way. And this guy, I love this line. This line would make a movie. He said to this alien, he said, well, I'm pretty good with machinery. Would you like me to come in and take a look, see if I can help? And I just thought that's the greatest line. And he was sincere. Mm-hmm. And the man in the tinfoil suit said, your friend is very concerned. He's not doing well. You should go back and reassure him that everything's okay. We'll be gone very shortly. And that's what he did. And a short while later, they all lifted up, he said, in unison, and took off, 0 to 500 miles an hour, and were gone. But those 2 guys, he said we were like 2 old war mates. He said we'd get together and have a whiskey every chance we could and go over this experience over and over again. And they just couldn't talk about it enough. And they stayed best of friends. So that's kind of nice. And it's, like I said, it's a rare exception to the rule.
No, it is. I mean, but you do find, as we say, there's people just part company or just don't talk about it. I mean, that's that. So after your encounter in Devil's Den, you and Toby, and you taken up in the ship, and not going into too much detail in that, obviously, just to ruin everything for the listeners, for if they're going to get the book and stuff. But when you got back, I know you're dehydrated, as you say, and you were pretty feeling pretty terrible.
We were.
And So feeling pretty terrible and stuff, and then obviously that incorporated into the mix of the OSI agents for the base and stuff. Or were they from the base, or were they drafted in from elsewhere? I know there's a bit of a roundabout, quite a big question in that. So
Yeah, and I can't speak to that because I don't know the answer, because I wasn't familiar with OSI agents any at all. Other than I knew that they had a reputation for being harsh.
yeah,
And when we got back to the base, we both had severe sunburn. We had flash burns to the eyes. That's the same burn that like an arc welder would get if they didn't wear that hood with the smoked glass.
yeah.
And had the worst sunburn I'd ever had in my life, but I never blistered and I never peeled. And we were both severely dehydrated. So they hospitalized us, but they separated us and they put us each in separate rooms. And there's a gentleman named Robert Hastings who's written a couple books here, and he also was famous for the 2001 press club hearings in Washington, D.C. back in 2001 to talk about UFOs. And his specialty is people in the military that see foreign out, UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, have an experience. And he said that it's absolutely, he cites a bunch of examples. It's common practice for them to break up the two. If there are 4 guys that see something, 4 people, they'll send them off in 4 different directions. They'll break them up. And so I'm in the hospital. I was hospitalized 3 days, 2 nights. And I was there on the second night. I knew I was going to be going home sometime the next day. And an OSI agent, my night nurse came in to give me an injection, and these 2 guys in business suits came in and followed her. And no, they weren't black. People asked me if they were men in black. No, they weren't. They wore a blue business suit. But I could tell they were cops. These guys were plainly police officers. I mean, they had that kind of swagger. They had their suit coat unbuttoned. I could see that they had a shoulder holster with a firearm in it. And one was an older guy, maybe late 40s, early 50s. And the other guy was a captain, early 30s maybe. And they walked in and they showed me their badges and read me my rights under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And, Toby and I made this pact, and we promised one another that under no circumstances would we tell anybody that we saw a UFO, the size of a medical building. Because we feared, and it was a legitimate fear, we feared that, we'd be sent for a psychological evaluation or maybe dismissed from the military, and that could cost us our GI Bill, our ticket to college education. And neither one of us wanted that. So we said that we would, and we were opposed to lying. So the story we told was we went to bed feeling funny and woke up feeling terrible and felt so sick we just came home. Now, on the face of it, that's the truth. So that was our story. And that's what I told this OSI agent. Now, I don't know how this OSI agent knew, but he knew. He knew what we saw, no question in my mind. And toward the end of this interrogation, the captain leaves, and then it's just me and this major in the room. And he had this Alabama, Mississippi accent, I'm not sure which. But he got down close to my ear and he whispered, he said, "Son, I know, and you 2 knuckleheads stumbled onto something while you were out there. And I think you know what I'm talking about." And I didn't answer. I didn't know how to answer. And he said, because I had a reputation in the squadron for being an amateur photographer. And that was commonly known. And he asked me, he says, All I want to know is how many pictures of it did you take? And, without thinking, I blurted out, "Sir, I didn't take a single picture." And he just smiled because I just confirmed for him that I saw something, And like I say, he knew. I don't know how he knew, but he knew.
That's what I found most interesting about it as well. That part of it is how they knew that. So did they have prior knowledge yet of the tracking, or that's just, there's so many kind of avenues you can go with that.
I think there are three distinct possibilities. It could be, number one, it could be that we work arm in arm with these aliens. We have an agreement. Or it could be that we had an earlier agreement and they are exceeding the bounds of their contract. Maybe they're allowed to take by treaty. There's a rumor that back in the 50s, when Dwight Eisenhower was president of the United States, that he met with aliens and they signed some type of treaty or pact, agreement, whatever you want to call it. And if they did that, we may have granted them permission to take X number of people per year, X number of head of cattle, because cattle mutilations, cattle abductions are a real thing here. And that's the second possibility. And the third possibility is that they do what they want to do and we can't do anything about it. They act with impunity. And I hope that's not the case. Any one of the three, I don't particularly care for. No.
That's there's possibilities there in all of them, and that. So moving on for, well, I'll stay with the OSI like slightly. I know like a section other than the OSI, which if you can touch on a wee bit, where they done a bit of regression with you. Did you ever get regression? If you can touch on that, but then did you ever get regression after that? With any other experiences?
Yeah, I had, and I'll keep it brief. I had regression through the OSI. The OSI brought me into their headquarters, and they had a hypnotist come in, a major, and I was given a drug called sodium amytal. And I had probably 30 people email me and said either I or my uncle or somebody knew of this happening. And it was common in the 60s and 70s for them to do this. And since then, I wanted to be regressed, but I've been fearful of it. Just a week ago Saturday, I was in Kentucky in a very rural area. And it was a bunch of people from KGRA radio. And we did a Bigfoot hunt. And it was a combination barbecue and get together and the like. But there was a young lady there who was a hypnotherapist. And she asked me, she says, "Have you ever been regressed?" And I said, I haven't. And I'm really not, I don't think I'm ready to, with one exception. And I talk about it in the Devil's Den, The Reckoning, where I had my iPhone in my pocket of my T-shirt while I was sleeping. I had earbuds in. And the next day, well, long and short of it was, my iPhone health app showed that I was 60 feet above my house. Now, it's designed to show flights of stairs climbed on 10-foot increments.
The GPS now.
Yeah, and well, that's what I thought too. And it spells it out on an XY graph with the vertical scale, the X graph showing height in 10-foot increments. And then the Y axis going from left to right shows passage of time. So if I walked up 6 flights of stairs, like I've done before, like in a parking garage or something, car park, you would see, because as time passes, my height goes up. There was only one bar there wasn't that stair step reading. There was one bar. And I took it to the Apple store, and the guy at the Apple store, pardon me, the woman at the Apple store told me that between 5:23 and 5:24 a.m., within that 1 minute period, I went 60 feet above my house. And that was the one incident that I wanted to be regressed on. And she did, and she regressed me. And I didn't have a lot of memory. She said it would probably take 2 or 3 regressions to get the whole fact out. But under this trance, I don't know how you're supposed to feel when you're hypnotized. I just felt very relaxed that she was taking me through the date and the time of the incident. And I'm just seeing it in my mind's eye, like a memory. I don't know if it's a true memory or not. But in this memory, I'm floating up in the air. I'm outside of my house. It's cold. I can see lots of starlight, and I can see a circular round ship above me, and I'm going up into that. And we stopped there. It was like an hour and a half to get to that point. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about hypnotic regression.
Was it a bit you were talking about where if you're getting regression, you seen a blank screen for as far as you could go, but if you couldn't go any further or see any further, was it just a blank screen, or was it, what was it you were seeing after the fact, or was it just stopping?
You're talking about the April 2019 event?
No, just in the regression in general, like that one, for example, when it's taking you so far within the regression and it stops, is it just like a blank screen, you can't see any further, or?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah, that's exactly what it was, because then what do you see next? And I said, I just see black. And I think that memory is blocked. That's what she told me. She says that memory is probably blocked. And I said, is there a way to get around that? And she said, yeah, with multiple sessions, you might be able to. But that indicates that something is blocking your memory. You know, and it could be some deep psychological fear, you know, that's a protective device. It could be of your own making, or, you know, it could be ET's way of keeping secrets.
The reason I asked that question as well was I had basically a witness who had seen something, and they were in like a medical practitioner so that they could do a bit of self-regression. So they tried it, they're trying that, and they'd done it multiple times, and they got to the event, but past they'd seen something. It wasn't like a UFO or such type. It was like they'd seen like some type of entity type thing running, and they were in a car. And when they got round this corner, it was with the family in the car and stuff. They got around this corner, and he'd done the self-regression, and every time he did it, he would get round the corner, and it was just a black screen, and he couldn't get round the screen. It was just like an actual black screen, and you could see up until that screen, but no round about the screen. But he always kind of thought about maybe going further and getting more regression to find that it was past that, because he said that although they spoke about the thing they've seen, him and his wife, and the kids seen it as well, but it was he couldn't remember much after that. He said he goes on after the event, I could remember actually passing that, or how we got home, or it was like the days later at work. He goes, I felt like in a bit of daze. And he said, I couldn't actually remember how we got home and whatever. He goes, we probably did drive home at some point, but I couldn't remember the rest of that drive home, coming home. And he goes, that's why I try to get past the actual thing I've seen first, to see what actually happened after. Like, I think something happened after seeing this thing. So it was quite interesting.
It's very interesting, because that's exactly the experience I had. When I was going up into the air, there was a circular ship above me with a black area underneath, and that's when things went black. And because in my mind's eye, I could see this play out almost like a movie. I mean, I knew it was a memory. I knew it wasn't real. but I could see it playing out in my head. And then we got to that point and it was just a black screen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that resonates with me.
No, it's totally interesting. So moving on for that, and then obviously where further on you spoke about Betty in the book. Do you? I'm not going. Obviously, we don't need to touch on what you were told because you could leave it for listeners to in the book if you don't want to touch on what you're actually told in that. But do you think? Why do you think you were told what you were told, and do you think they tell the truth?
Well, those are two great questions. And it's crossed my mind that I could have been told a lie for purposes of misinformation, to make me look a fool or make the subject look ludicrous and unbelievable. That's possible. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the future holds. But I felt this fondness for this entity, Betty, or Sue, as I knew her as a young child. And I would feel very betrayed if that were the case. But who knows? I don't know what their intentions are. I got more of a vibe from her of concern than I did misinformation. And I hope that's right. I think I had these feelings for her, and don't get me wrong, they're not romantic in any way, but they're more maternal. I guess because I was 4 when I first encountered her. These are kind of maternal feelings that I have for her. And I don't know. That's the huge question. What's all this about? I would love to sit down with her and have her answer questions, but it doesn't work that way. They tell me what they want me to know, and they're just not taking questions that day.
Does it worry you or keep you up at night for what you were told?
No, it doesn't, because I've had things happen over the years, and I don't mention this, I don't think, in either of my books, and I should. My wife and I over the years have had strange experiences with electronics in particular. And we've had, oh my gosh, since 1977, we've lived a dozen different places and had dozens of television sets. And to this day, it'll happen maybe once, maybe twice a year. In the middle of the night, the television set will turn itself on in the living room, never in the bedroom, always in the living room. And it used to scare us, but it hasn't scared us in a very long time. Now it's just a nuisance. And whichever one of us is more awake gets up and goes in, gets the remote, turns it off. And, we always say out loud, knock it off. Now, I don't know if that helps or not, but it makes me feel better to say it. The other thing I've had happen, only a couple of times, but it's pretty dramatic when it happens, is I'll be driving. This happened in Michigan and it happened in Vermont. I'm living in Texas now. It hasn't happened since we've been here. But I'll be driving and on like a residential street, or like a downtown area where there are regularly spaced overhead streetlights. Streetlights will go out as I drive past them. So, and I've had 3, maybe 4 go out, blink, 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 as soon as I go past them. And I don't know what that means, but it's unsettling, especially if you're a passenger, So yeah, I've had a lot of strange things with electronics.
I have as well. No, in terms of electronics going haywire on me, but certainly have with some things. One question I was going to touch on as well was there was one house that you stayed in when you were younger, and you said it had a bad vibe to it.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that was linked to the phenomena, or do you think it was part of the phenomena?
I don't think that it was linked to this phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll say this, I think that there are a lot of things out there that we don't know and that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's such a thing as the paranormal, and there's such a thing as the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And they're two distinctly different things. And ghosts and demons and all those things I think of as being supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And then the UFOs I think of as being paranormal. I don't think that there's a nexus, a connection between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're two distinct, different entities. That house that we lived in, we were only in there a year, and I have no idea why my dad bought it. It was almost identical to the house we were living in. But all of us had, misfortune, and things go wrong, and we were all glad to get out of there. And I think that house was haunted. I think that was a supernatural event.
Mm-hmm. But sometimes you find, though, and it's possibly just could be relayed as, let's say, for example, you've got your abduction scenarios, and then you get a lot of that kind of melting pot phenomenon kind of mixing together. So you might have poltergeist activity within a house where there's abduction scenarios happening, but it's probably just could be laid down to that, and people are just seeing it as poltergeist activity because that's all they know. But you do find that kind of melting potty kind of things happening, and as you say, so your kind of belief in it is kind of separate in that regard. Right.
But it's not just the television. It's not just the street lights. My wife and I have experienced other events.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, the two are happening simultaneously, paranormal and the supernatural event.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had events like I had my car keys go missing. And I'm a creature of habit. I know where I put my car keys. I put them in the same place, every time with my wallet. I know where they're at. And my car keys came up missing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I got it backwards. My wallet came up missing. My car keys were right there. My wallet came up missing.
Mm-hmm.
And, but same thing, I knew where it was. I knew where it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked all over and I couldn't find it. And I'm just, this is like 4 days in, and I'm just ready to start canceling credit cards and doing all the things you have to do when you lose a wallet. Mm-hmm. And my wife said, "Did you check in the garage? Did you check everywhere?" And I'm like, well, there's a little cubby hole with a hot water heater that we've not been in in 3 years, we've not been in that room. And I opened it up and my wallet was sitting right on top of the hot water heater.
That happens time and time again with these things as well. We'll find things, obscure places in freezers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, one other thing I was going to ask you, because obviously you've came through the kind of military connection as well, and with all the recent revelations going on with the kind of the start of the kind of disclosure, as if we say, with Luisa Elizondo and going through all the kind of stuff they were doing, and then after that, where the program in the History Channel where they were doing unidentified and stuff. Were you ever contacted by any of them? Because obviously you had a kind of military connection. I know they didn't really touch on the abduction scenarios that much. They touched on it on one of the kind of last episodes they did, and I think it's maybe just a wee bit too far from them now, the way I could probably see it. But they did actually touch on it. So were you contacted, or did they discuss anything with yourself?
If we're talking about disclosure and how it's going to progress, I think that it's going to be done incrementally, if at all. I mean, there's two scenarios, something that they have no control over, something dramatic happens, spaceship lands on the United Nations parking lot or something, that's something they have no control over. But if they're going to disclose to the public incrementally, and I think whatever they disclose is going to be valid worldwide. I mean, it's going to be, do people believe or not believe? But I think it's going to be in just tiny pieces. I think it's going to be just like now. We have the Nimitz Carrier Group and that other task force. We have U.S. active duty Navy personnel who state that they see something, and our government has certified that whatever they saw wasn't, to the best of their knowledge, terrestrial in nature. Mm-hmm. So that's as far as they'll go for right now. But they're in the United States. The United States announced kind of quietly that it's going to begin a separate office, an agency devoted to the study of UAPs and the phenomenon. Mm-hmm. I was joking with my wife. I said I want to send them a resume, and I mean it's just right now. It's just to the point where Congress has approved funding for it. And that's as far as it's gotten that I know of. I mean, but they're going to set up this agency, set up this office, and what are they going to do? I don't know. I find it hard to believe they're going to set up an agency if they don't have something known to study. Yeah. They know so much more.
Oh, totally. Totally. There's so much more going on.
Should we be afraid? I don't know. I get asked that question all the time. Should we be afraid? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
It's a hard one. I mean, it really is. But I think there's I think it possibly should be. I'm not saying it's going to be nefarious or bad or whatever, but I do believe that there's a reasoning why there's like a push to try and let people know quicker than they probably even plan to at some point. So that's what I kind of believe in my own kind of head, that something's turned their hand to actually say, right, we need to do this now. No, because that the people should know and all that kind of stuff. I do think that something's turned their hand to make it be pushed a bit more. And to be fair to some of the people who are working at like Luis Elizondo and things like that, I mean, stand-up guys, you know what I mean? But there's obviously people above that, and it's allowing it to happen, no stopping it from happening. So,
so there's. And I question too: do we fear the government, or do we fear people could? I mean, I don't think this is going to happen, but there could be riots in the streets of New York and Tokyo and wherever. I mean, and if that happens, your neighbors might be the enemy. Who knows? I mean, supply chain disruptions. There's all kinds of crazy things that could flow from that, from such an announcement. I have no idea what the religious community, how they would react to such a thing. Supposedly the Catholic Church has admitted that it's possible for extraterrestrial beings to exist. Mm-hmm. And if they do, and they come here, they said that they would welcome them and seek to baptize them into the Catholic Church.
That was another comment as well that was kind of kept, I'm not saying low key, but it just wasn't mainstream people kind of thinking of it, or that statement coming out of the Vatican as well and stuff. Big statement.
Yeah, that's a big statement. Aye. And I got interested in that, and I researched that after they made that statement, 2017, 2016, it's been a while now. I didn't know that the Vatican aggressively recruits and hires physicists, cosmologists, and astronomers. And that the Catholic Church owns, and this is fact, this isn't misinformation, owns 3 observatories, one in northern Italy, one in California, and one in South America. I want to say Brazil. Mm-hmm. And they routinely publish papers in respected journals on the topic, scientific journals, discoveries made by Roman Catholic priests that are brought into the priesthood and made astronomers. And, I guess my question is, why would the church spend the time and money to investigate that?
It's really interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely we're living in interesting times. Definitely are. Well, Terry, listen, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and covering obviously your stories with us and your accounts throughout your years, and obviously your book as well. I mean, your 2 books are amazing, and I'd get anybody, obviously, if you can, get out and get the book, listen to it. I mean, I was lucky enough for the work I had at the time. I could sit and listen to it on a good drive, so I have listened a good number of times and pretty good and stuff. So I totally thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you coming on and coming on with us as well. So on behalf of the Scottish Paranormal Podcast, I'd like to say thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.